Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my first installment of New Album Spotlight this year. This is the show where I talk about a new album that's recently come out and recommend it to you guys because I think it's worth your attention. Give you some reasons why I like it and why I might recommend it to you, and you can see if it's to your taste through this review. So thank you guys for joining me. This year I'm trying to do this on a weekly basis, so every Tuesday I plan to have a new album spotlight where I do a review about a new album that has recently come out, and we'll see if I can keep up that pace. It depends on when new releases are coming out and if I have enough to talk about. Maybe on an off week I can do a classic album review or something like that, but for now, it seems for the immediate future there should be plenty of albums to talk about to keep me occupied. And I have a really good one as the first one, a good kickoff for this year. This is Riverside's new album, ID.Entity. I've just been loving this record to death. Riverside are one of my favorite bands. They're a Polish group that really dabble in progressive metal throughout their career, but also maybe a more atmospheric prog sound like Pink Floyd in places. They do a lot of high conceptual work, and they're just a really talented group of musicians that have really taken the prog world by storm in a lot of ways. And they're just super consistent album to album. They have these really cool, compact albums that really work well together, really occupy a good theme, and just showcase a band that has extreme talent and great writing chops. And really, I wanted to highlight this album, ID.Entity, as just another solid release in the pantheon of their catalog. This is their 8th studio album, and it really delves into some interesting themes about identity. You know, that's the play on the title, ID.Entity. Really, it's the word identity separated out a little bit into ID.Entity, which is somewhat of a clever nod that I believe Marius Duda is doing to really accentuate the theme and to give a little play on it like he's known to do. And it's basically about looking at our modern society and looking at how a lot of things that we deal with technology and with places in society that try to define us and tell us who we are, and how we need to embrace our own identity, how we need to come to a conclusion about who we are despite all the noise that we hear in our modern society. And it really goes through this in a variety of different ways throughout the different tracks. So this album has a really old school sound to it in some ways, but it also is diving into some new sounds at the same time. So I think it's a good balance of really leaning into their past history and reaching for those hallmarks that Riverside fans are familiar with, but providing a new layer of sound and style to their music that really adds a new dimension also. So it's a really cool way that they balance that. You hear little touchstones and nods to things like Rapid Eye Movement and Shrine of New Generation Slaves, but you get this new vibrant sheen on the new release, which a lot of that I feel almost has an 80s aesthetic to it, especially in the opening track. There's like this really retro sounding big keyboards, almost like Aha or Depeche Mode or some 80s style band that you might hear really baked into their already progressive metal-ish sound that they have going for them. So it's a cool blend and provides a new dimension to this, a new layer. And I think another notable thing about this album is that there's a sense of rawness and a live feel to the production of the album. And I know Marius Duda has talked about this is intentional, that they really like their live performances. That's where they really shine, in their opinion, is in the live arena. And since they don't have very many live albums to their name, they thought it'd be fun to craft a new album that has that sort of a live feel to it, giving a more dynamic and really excitable characteristic. And I think that really comes through. And I also on this album, they really in the past tend to lean on very somber tones and very dark imagery and things like that. I think there's more of a sense of fun and playfulness on this record than they have had on some immediate previous records. You know, they're really leaning into having a bit more fun with the music, and it's still darker themes. You know, don't get me wrong. Like I said, the idea of this, you know, modern tech telling us who we should be and how, you know, trying to control us and taking away our identity. You know, these are darker themes that we're dealing with, but I mean in the style that they're performing in, you know, trying to incorporate this like 80s pop almost influence into their music, or trying to I feel like the last track, one of the singles that came out called Self-Aware, has almost a reggae feel at parts that almost calls back to the Police. So you're seeing these little playful moments that shows the band is having fun and really diving into this music in a new way, which is a stark contrast to their prior album, Wasteland, which was a very somber affair dealing with the loss of their guitarist. It was a very meaningful album for them, very deep and lyrically conscious about those events. So there was a lot of darkness and heaviness on that album, and so it's a nice refresher to come to this album, and it's a bit more light and fun in a lot of ways, but still with their characteristic heaviness and some of the dark topics that they tend to cover. So going into the tracks a little bit, Friend or Foe is a fantastic opening track with some big 80s inspired keyboard, like I mentioned, great bass lines and melodies, really a great blend of that typical heavy prog they're known for, but throwing in this 80s style into the mix. And lyrically, it's a really fun play on this idea of the identity of the band itself, that a lot of people try to pigeonhole the band, like you're, a progressive metal band, you're a neo-prog band, whatever the case may be. And I don't think they really identify the way a lot of people try to place those identifiers onto them. And instead, they just want to be who they are, and they want to embrace their own identity, and that's why they're embracing this more 80s style sound that's different from what you've heard on previous Riverside openers. So I think that's a play on that hey, we're going to be who we are, we're not going to be pigeonholed into your labels. We want to just preserve our own identity. So really starts the theme off really well. Then we get into Landmine Blast, which has a really interesting bass line to begin the song before we get into that typical dark, moody atmosphere, and a great guitar solo. Love the verse with these big keyboard blasts and quirky guitar lines. There's a cool breakdown in the midsection. Really some callbacks to ADHD in some ways. Has a bit of that feel, punchiness and heaviness, but a really cool melody. Lyrically, it's somewhat about, in my opinion, people who are ready to pounce on you no matter what you say online, or you try to make a comment, or you bring up this thing. People are just primed and ready to pounce on you if you say something wrong and cancel you, or do something to tear you down. And that's the landmines that they're talking about in the title. In this day and age, you can so easily step on a landmine by something you say that can offend someone and make them want to cancel you or bring you down in internet culture. So I think that's a large part of what they're talking about here. Big Tech Brother also mentions some of these tech vibes, kind of a 1984 Brave New World dystopian future sort of aesthetic and lyrically, but the music is really fun. Great shuffle beat with some funky keyboards that almost ape the sound of like a brass section. Really cool proggy opening, leads to some cool dark haunting vibes followed with prog bombast. It's a really cool blend of styles. You get a really cool section where the band sort of drops out during the verse, and we get almost a piano ballad feel before the band comes back in full power mode. So it's a really cool blend of things, a really good extended track that gives you a lot of cool feels. This leads into Post-Truth, which is a really cool song that could have worked well as a good meaty single. Great cool keyboard sound starts this with some really cool vibes, a great keyboard solo in the middle. The keyboards on this are really ever present and are really a great focus on this album, along with those great bass lines as usual. I think the bass and keyboards are really the stars of the show here. And this is more talking, I think, about somewhat of our fake news style world that we live in, where we're constantly being lied to by the media and by tech companies and all of these things. And it's hard in this world to identify what the real truth is. The theme of the album culminates in this great epic track, The Place Where I Belong, a personal favorite of mine that's an epic track sort of along the lines of like Escalator Shrine that has several sections to it. Starts with acoustic guitar and vocals and is almost folky in its flavor. Very beautiful, great atmospheric keyboards build up the sound before we get some sinister 80s synth. An awesome funky bass line leads us into the next section with some killer grooves, some screaming organ. This is where Mariusz Duda gets a little bit more fierce in his vocal delivery. He's angry, as you can tell, and he's really delivering these lyrics about trying to find your own identity and how the world tries to foist your identity upon you or tells you what you should be, what you should do, and Duda is kind of rejecting that and saying, I need to find the place where I belong, outside of what everyone tells me of where I should belong. That doesn't matter. It only matters where my place is and how I feel about it. I think it's a really cool piece, and ends with some folky acoustic guitar and gorgeous piano, really beautiful guitar and key soloing to play this part out. Just some really sublime melodies that are really wonderful. And then you end with the 2 singles that they've released. I'm Done With You, a great heavy track that really is a fun one, and a great single, and Self-Aware, which, like I said, is a good driving rock song with a bit of that Police vibe during a reggae-ish type section, which is more extended on the album as it leads out with this more atmospheric ending that really is a good culmination of everything that came before and provides for a good closer. So, and once again, we get more of those album themes of trying to be who you are, finding your own identity, not letting other people dictate who you are and what you're going to do with your life. I'm Done With You is especially a fierce way to explain that, of stop telling me what I need to do. I'm my own person. It has that sort of vibe to it, and it's really cool. So, and I feel like Self-Aware is an interesting reflection on a bit of our addiction to our phones and our technology, trying to get rid of it, but finding that you keep getting drawn back in and keep feeling like you need it and being dependent on it. I think it's a really interesting reflection of that and how tech can sometimes become our identity in a lot of ways. So really rich thematically, really great music all along the way. Has that great raw live feel to it that I think really elevates it as well. And it just makes for a stellar album that I really strongly recommend, not just to fans of Riverside who will obviously eat this up and love this, but to all fans of good, solid, progressive rock. I think they often get lumped into this progressive metal style vein, which they have heavier moments and they have somewhat aggressive vocals at times, not growling or anything, but just more of a fierce vocal delivery, but always very melodic and very pleasant. But they balance that out well with Pink Floyd-ish soundscapes and more laid back sections and just really strong melodies. And they don't do this virtuosity, let's just show off our instruments like you might hear from something like Dream Theater, which I love. I love that side of the coin too, but I think what they do expertly is really focus on the songs and really focus their craft on building layers of sound that are pleasant and that service the lyrics and the concepts that they're going for. So I think that's a brilliant way that they go about things. So I think this could appeal to any Prog fan. I really hope that you guys will go check this out and that you guys will enjoy it. Comes out on Friday, which I believe is January 20th, and it's going to be a really cool release and one of the big standouts of the year coming right out of the gate. I think it's going to place highly in a lot of year-end lists and all of that sort of stuff also. And so strongly recommended. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and liked my rundown of this album, and that you guys will go check it out and be excited about it like I am. So thank you guys so much, and I'll catch you guys in another video. Bye.